Imagine stepping into an elegant office, filled with dark wood furniture and shelves lined with leather-bound books. For Alice, a 17-year-old just beginning her first job, this place symbolizes the gateway to her future. But what starts as a typical day at Mr. Jason's prestigious office quickly turns into the unraveling of a deep family secret. As Alice navigates the challenges of her new role, her curiosity is piqued by a mysterious old photograph on her boss's desk, one that will soon connect her past with the present in ways she never expected. This photograph, seemingly out of place in the meticulously organized office, stirs a feeling of familiarity within Alice. As she digs deeper, she discovers unsettling connections between the woman in the photo and her own family, leading to revelations that will change everything she thought she knew about herself and her mother. What happens when the lines between past and present blur? When long-buried secrets come to light? Join Alice on a journey filled with intrigue, unexpected twists, and emotional discoveries. This is a story of family, loss, and the courage to face the truth, no matter where it leads. Dive into this gripping tale, where every detail matters, and every moment brings Alice closer to uncovering a life-altering truth. Facing the end of her adolescence, Alice found herself needing to start working. Fortunately, the girl was hired by Mr. Jason's office, one of the city's leading businessmen. However, she never imagined that an old photo on her new boss's desk would change her life forever. Alice was 17 years old and going through a transition, like a ship leaving its port and sailing into unknown waters. Her brown eyes, always observant and curious, reflected the sunlight streaming through the windows of Mr. Jason's office, where she had secured her first job. The environment was imposing and elegant, with shelves filled with leather-bound books and dark wood furniture exuding a sense of tradition and authority. On her first day at work, she entered the office with a mix of shyness and excitement. Alice had not had an easy life, having grown up in a small neighborhood where opportunities were limited, and hopes often reduced to distant dreams. However, her determination had led her to this chance to work for one of the most respected men in the city. Mr. Jason was a figure of great local prestige, known both for his integrity and his reserved demeanor. He was not a man of many words, which only fueled Alice's fascination and curiosity. To her, the office was almost like a sanctuary of untold mysteries. Every detail, from the old paintings on the walls to the scent of books and papers, seemed to carry its own story. Trying to absorb every nuance of the environment, the young woman glanced around. There was a painting on the wall depicting a hunting scene, and Mr. Jason's desk was meticulously organized, with papers neatly stacked. She also noticed a small shelf filled with what appeared to be Mr. Jason's personal collections, such as antique pocket knives, a compass, and some faded maps. Moments later, she was greeted by Mr. Jason himself, a middle-aged man with graying hair and a deep, contemplative gaze. He observed her with a look that seemed to penetrate her soul, assessing her with an intensity that Alice found somewhat intimidating. "Good morning, Mr. Jason," Alice said, trying to conceal the nervousness in her voice. Mr. Jason nodded with a brief smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, but was enough to convey a sense of warmth and approval. "Good morning, Alice. Let's get started." She followed him to a small desk in the corner of the office, where she would begin her work. Mr. Jason handed her a stack of documents to review, instructing her to mark any errors or inconsistencies. His movements were methodical and precise, reflecting the seriousness with which he approached his work. As she started familiarizing herself with the tasks, Alice found herself intrigued by the aura of mystery surrounding Mr. Jason. The way he kept his distance and his reserved nature only fueled her growing curiosity. Each moment in the office seemed to carry a promise of something greater, like a story waiting to be unraveled. Every morning, Alice faced the challenge of her new position with a mix of enthusiasm and nervousness. Upon arriving, she made a point of brightening her face with a genuine smile, a small gesture that, despite its simplicity, was a clear declaration of her determination. Her brown eyes, always bright and attentive, reflected youthful energy and insatiable curiosity. Alice had learned the importance of making a good impression, especially in such a formal and respected environment as Mr. Jason's office. Her carefully ironed clothes were an extension of her seriousness about her work. Every detail was meticulously checked before she left the house. As she crossed the office's threshold, Alice headed to her workspace with an upright and determined posture. Even with the butterflies in her stomach, she tried to maintain an expression of confidence. Every action, from the way she adjusted her chair to how she organized her materials, was imbued with an almost religious attention to detail. Observant and reserved, Mr. Jason noticed these subtleties. Although he rarely offered praise, his approving glances and small gestures of recognition were enough to validate Alice's efforts. On a particularly quiet morning, Alice completed 2 months at the office. While reviewing some documents, Mr. Jason approached her desk. "Alice," he began with a tone that was neutral but affectionate, "I've noticed you've been particularly careful with the organization of the files. It really makes a difference." Alice, a bit surprised, looked up at him in a gesture of gratitude. "Thank you, Mr. Jason. I'm trying to do my best." Mr. Jason nodded, a brief and rare smile appearing on his lips. "Your dedication does not go unnoticed. Keep it up." This brief acknowledgement was a great encouragement for Alice. Knowing that her work was being noticed and appreciated helped dissipate some of the nervousness she felt. The quiet respect she received from Mr. Jason was a testament to her growing competence and commitment. In the weeks that followed, Alice's work routine was marked by a responsibility that impressed everyone around her. Every day, upon arriving at the office, she immediately headed to her small workspace and began the day with a well-established ritual. First, she opened her drawer and took out the day's task list, a sheet of paper that, for her, was more than just a set of instructions. It was a map guiding her activities and daily goals. Alice carefully examined the list, marking each item with a fine-point pen. She had a habit of breaking down tasks into smaller steps, creating a sublist for each more complex task. This method not only helped her stay focused, but also gave her a sense of accomplishment as she checked off completed items. As the day progressed, Alice dedicated herself to her tasks with a commitment that did not go unnoticed. She adjusted her work pace according to the complexity of the tasks and never left room for errors or oversights. The impeccable organization of her desk and the way she kept the documents aligned and labeled were direct reflections of her systematic approach. Since Alice arrived at the company, Mr. Jason had been observing her diligence with keen attention, noticing not only the quality of her work, but also the way she engaged with each challenge. To him, it was clear that Alice possessed a rare and exceptional work ethic, something he deeply appreciated. His compliments were measured, but always carefully considered. He often stopped to offer constructive feedback or a word of encouragement. "You did an excellent job reviewing the reports yesterday," he commented one morning while Alice was going through a stack of documents. "The way you approached converting losses into profit was remarkable." It's that attention to detail that makes a difference. Alice smiled shyly, feeling encouraged by her boss's words. "Thank you, Mr. Jason. I'm always looking for ways to improve." "Remember," he continued, "constant practice and the pursuit of improvement are key. Every challenge is an opportunity to grow." Alice absorbed each piece of advice with gratitude, knowing that Mr. Jason's feedback was a crucial part of her development. The exchange of knowledge and the building of a solid professional relationship were vital to her learning experience. She knew she was in an environment where her work was valued and where she had the chance to evolve constantly, motivating her to give her best every day. At the end of another day of intense work, Alice arrived home exhausted but with a glint of satisfaction in her eyes. Although simple and modest, her home was a welcoming refuge waiting for her. Upon opening the door, she was immediately greeted by the comforting aroma of homemade food that filled the air with the promise of a tasty dinner. The inviting smell indicated that the meal was almost ready, a confirmation of her mother Mary's dedication to preparing something special for her. Mary, at 31, was a constant and loving presence in Alice's life. Her dark brown hair was always carefully arranged, and her gentle eyes shone with unconditional love. That day, upon seeing Alice enter, Mary immediately left the stove and approached, enveloping her in a warm embrace that seemed to dissolve all the tensions accumulated throughout the day. "How was your day, dear?" Mary asked in a soft and interested tone as they broke away from the hug. Alice, with the fatigue in her shoulders beginning to dissipate in her mother's comforting presence, replied, "It was a good day, Mom. I worked on the reports and organized some important documents. My boss praised me for my attention to detail." Mary listened attentively, her heart warming at the passion and enthusiasm her daughter showed when talking about her work. She headed to the kitchen, where the food was being prepared, and began serving dinner. "I'm so proud of you, Alice. Your dedication is admirable. I always knew you had great potential." Alice sat down at the table, looking around the house, decorated with family photos capturing happy moments and old furniture that added a touch of nostalgia to the atmosphere. The simplicity of the house did not diminish its warmth, on the contrary, the small details made it a true and welcoming home. "Thank you, Mom," Alice replied, feeling more relaxed as she saw the homemade food on the table. "My boss is very respected, and it's amazing to learn from him. Every day is a new opportunity to improve." Mary served a generous portion of food on Alice's plate and sat down in front of her. "I love hearing about your progress. It's wonderful to see how you're growing and becoming such a responsible and dedicated young woman. Just know that I'm always here for you, no matter what happens." The dinner, served with care, was a welcome break in the busy routine. Alice shared more about her challenges and learnings, while Mary listened with a proud smile. To her, watching her daughter grow and thrive, facing life's challenges with determination, was the greatest reward she could receive. Meanwhile, the city vibrated with the frenetic rhythm of an ordinary night, and Mr. Jason's office was enveloped in a calm and profound silence. Inside this serene environment, Mr. Jason sat alone at his desk, with an expression that reflected a mixture of sadness and nostalgia. The office, with its walls lined with old books and dark wood furniture, seemed almost immortalized in time, as if it were a constant backdrop for his solitary reflections after work hours. Impeccably organized, his desk was a testament to his commitment to order and efficiency. Every item was meticulously placed in the right spot, the documents stacked with precision, and personal items arranged in a way that reflected the meticulous manner in which he lived his life and conducted his work. It also served as a balm for his restless mind. Mr. Jason held an old, carefully framed photo in his hands with an almost sacred delicacy. The image showed a man and a woman in a moment of genuine joy, their smiles radiating a sincere happiness that seemed to transcend time. Mr. Jason stared at the photo with a distant look, as if trying to capture every detail of that precious memory, which was now just an echo of the past. His eyes, usually so firm and determined, were now filled with a palpable melancholy. He ran his thumb over the surface of the frame, as if trying to feel the presence of the woman in the photograph, who was someone very special to him, with whom he had shared many happy and profound moments. As the moonlight gently filtered through the windows, casting the office in a delicate glow, Mr. Jason allowed himself a pause in the meticulous routine that characterized his daily life. He recalled the moments he had shared with that special person, laughs during dinners, deep conversations under the stars, and small but meaningful gestures that defined the depth of their connection. The absence of this person was still a weight on his heart, like a wound that had not fully healed. The image brought forth a whirlwind of emotions, from longing to a subtle but persistent pain. These happy yet distant moments seemed almost more real than the present he was living. With a deep sigh, Mr. Jason placed the photo on his desk, carefully aligning it with other personal items and documents. The pain of loss had never completely dissipated, but he had learned to live with it, keeping these precious memories in a special place in his heart. Looking around the office, he realized that despite the responsibilities and respect he had earned in the community, there were parts of his life that remained hidden in the shadows of his past. He stood up from the desk, ran a thoughtful hand through his graying hair, and gave the photo one last look. Still, in the silence of his office, Mr. Jason was deep in thought. The image of Alice, the young intern who had recently started working for him, came to mind, bringing an unexpected wave of nostalgia and reflection. Mr. Jason clearly remembered the day he decided to hire Alice. At that moment, something peculiar deeply impressed him, the physical resemblance between her and the special person from his past, the same one in the photo. The way Alice had dark brown hair and bright eyes brought forth a wave of emotions he had carefully kept at bay. The fact that she was also a dedicated and enthusiastic young woman only intensified the parallel between her and the woman he missed so much. Alice, with her cheerful smile, had become a living mirror of the memories he carried. Her presence in the office seemed not just a coincidence, but a constant reminder of those bygone times filled with precious moments and of a love that, though lost, had never been forgotten. For Mr. Jason, this created a complex mix of emotions, a combination of longing and a kind of solace. While looking around, he realized that despite the pain he still felt from the loss, there was an unexpected comfort in Alice's presence. The young woman not only reminded him of his past, but also brought a new light and a new perspective to the office. It was as if, through her, he could relive a part of his life that had been deeply significant and that now found an echo in his daily routine. Days later, on a quiet afternoon at the office, Alice wandered among the desks, enjoying the serenity that enveloped the environment. The silence was broken only by the soft hum of computers. Mr. Jason's office, with its elegant decor and the soft light filtering through the windows, created an atmosphere that promoted concentration and peace. When Alice entered Mr. Jason's room to leave a document, her eyes were drawn to an object she hadn't noticed until then. On one side of the desk, almost hidden among the papers, was a black and white photo. The contrast of the old image with the rest of the meticulously organized and modern desk made the photo stand out like a relic from the past. Alice approached it, her curiosity growing with each step. The photo showed a woman with a serene and gentle expression, her dark hair and deep, kind eyes portraying an image of beauty and tranquility. To her surprise, Alice realized that the woman in the photo bore a striking resemblance to her mother, Mary. The dark brown hair and gentle eyes were characteristics that immediately caught her attention. Trying to process what she was seeing, a shiver of surprise ran down her spine as she absorbed the image. Mr. Jason had never mentioned anything about a personal connection, and the presence of that photo stirred a wave of questions in Alice's mind. She wondered what the connection between that woman and Mr. Jason could be. The photo seemed old, with faded edges and a pale tone that suggested it had been taken many years ago. With each passing minute, Alice's curiosity only grew. Her heart beat a little faster as she decided she needed to know more about the connection between that woman and Mr. Jason. However, as Mr. Jason was returning from a meeting in another city, Alice backed away before being noticed, deciding that it was better not to ask immediate questions about the photo. Alice felt a strong urge to uncover more about the woman and her connection with Mr. Jason, but also knew it would be imprudent, even disrespectful, to ask him directly. So, she decided to take a more subtle approach to solve the mystery. Nevertheless, it left Alice with a strange feeling of familiarity and a growing curiosity. The resemblance between the woman in the photo and her mother, Mary, was so striking that it seemed impossible to ignore. That same day, while carrying out her daily tasks, Alice began to broach the subject discreetly with her colleagues. She tried to insert the conversation about the photo in a way that seemed like casual curiosity. At first, she made informal comments about the office decor and how the environment reflected Mr. Jason's personality. On other occasions, she mentioned the old photos she had noticed, talking about how interesting it was to learn more about the personal items of colleagues and about each other's past. However, the responses from her colleagues were evasive and reserved. They always smiled cordially and gave vague answers, often steering the conversation toward other topics. "Ah yes, I know the photo," one colleague said in a neutral tone. "The person in the image is really important to Mr. Jason, but I don't know much more than that." Another colleague, when asked about the woman in the photo, simply nodded with a thoughtful look and added, "She played a significant role in his life, that much I know, but Mr. Jason is very private about these personal matters." Alice felt like she was hitting a wall. Every attempt to learn more about the woman in the photo resulted in answers as discreet as a whisper in the wind. Frustrated but not discouraged, she decided that the investigation needed to be done more directly and independently. If no one was willing to provide details, she would have to seek answers on her own. At the end of the workday, Alice began to observe the office more closely, hoping to find some other clue that could clarify the identity of the woman in the photo. She reviewed the files he had given her, trying to detect any mention of names or past events that might be related to that woman, but found nothing. When she arrived home that afternoon, Alice was filled with a mixture of anxiety and excitement. To her surprise, Mary was not at home. Completely focused on the mystery surrounding the old photo in Mr. Jason's office, Alice decided to review the family photo album, believing that there might be some clue about the mysterious woman in those time-worn pages. Entering the living room, Alice went straight to where the album was kept, on a shelf next to the sofa. With trembling hands of anticipation, she pulled the photo album from the shelf and settled comfortably in the armchair, carefully opening it. Alice began to leaf through the pages slowly. The photos were organized chronologically, and she found herself immersed in a sea of visual memories that told the story of her family. But her attention was especially focused on the photos of her mother, Mary. Alice examined each image with a keen eye, searching for any resemblance to the woman in the office photo. She found pictures of Mary at various moments in her life, some of which bore an uncanny resemblance to the woman in the office photo. Suddenly, memories of her own past began to emerge. One particularly striking photo was of a day in the park. The sun was shining brightly, and Alice saw her father, a man with kind eyes and a proud smile, pushing her on a swing as she laughed with joy. The sun's reflection on the trees and the expression of pure happiness on her father's face seemed almost to jump out of the photo. Alice could feel the warmth of the day and the lightness of the moment as if she were reliving the scene in real time. Another photo showed her father teaching her to ride a bike. He was crouched beside her, holding the bike with one hand while the other was extended, ready to catch Alice if she lost her balance. The smile on her father's face was of pure pride, reflecting the joy he felt in seeing his daughter reach a new milestone. Alice remembered the feeling of accomplishment and security when her father was around, assuring her that she could face any challenge. As Alice continued to leaf through the family photo album, a nostalgic smile remained on her lips. But suddenly, she stopped at a photo that captured an especially precious moment. In the image, her father was carrying her on his shoulders, both laughing together with contagious joy. The photo seemed to vibrate with a simple and sincere happiness, a reflection of a time when life was light and her father was still by her side. Looking at that photo, Alice felt a tightness in her chest. That image was the last photograph taken before the tragedy that had taken her father away. The shock of the loss was still an open wound in her soul, and the longing manifested itself with overwhelming force. She could almost hear his laughter, feel the warmth of his shoulders, and the affection of his presence, even if it was just a frozen memory in time. Tears began to well up in her eyes, and her emotion manifested in a mix of sadness and gratitude. Her father's loving presence and guidance were a fundamental part of her life, and his absence left a deep void that nothing seemed to completely fill. With a deep sigh, Alice realized that despite her search, the photo album did not offer the answers she was looking for about the woman in Mr. Jason's photo. The memories she was revisiting were precious and fundamental to her understanding of who she was, but they did not help clarify the mystery that troubled her. Determined not to let her emotions divert her from her focus, Alice carefully closed the album. She did so with a silent reverence, as if she were not just closing a set of images, but also a part of her own history and the memory of her father. Before getting up, she gave the album one last look, grateful for the memories it contained. Even though it hadn't answered her questions about the woman in Mr. Jason's office photo, it offered comfort and a connection to the past that was invaluable. After a sigh of both frustration and satisfaction, Alice stood up, her heart a little lighter and her mind full of reflections. Alice made a firm decision: she would continue her investigation. After carefully placing the album back on the shelf, a photo slipped out and fell to the floor. Alice froze for a moment, and curiosity led her to bend down to pick up the photo. When her fingers touched the image, a sudden chill ran down her spine, and her heart began to beat faster as she looked at the photo. It was the same old photo she had seen on Mr. Jason's desk. The woman in the image was the same, with the same dark hair and the same kind eyes. Alice felt a whirlwind of emotions as she realized that, somehow, the woman who had intrigued her in Mr. Jason's office had found her way into her own home. The mystery had become even more enigmatic and personal, as she was increasingly convinced that the woman was her mother. Before she could fully process the significance of this discovery, the door opened, and Mary entered the house, bringing with her a breeze of normality that contrasted with the confusion of the moment. Her mother looked at the scene with a mixture of surprise and concern upon seeing that photo in her daughter's hand. Alice was still stunned, holding the photo with a firm grip. Their eyes met, and with a trembling voice, she asked, "Mom, who is the man in the photo?" Mary's reaction was immediate and unexpected. Without saying a word, she rushed over to Alice, pulling the photo from her daughter's hand with an urgency that made her seem almost desperate. Mary's face was tense, and her normally soft and welcoming tone was harsh. "He's no unimportant," she said, her voice a mixture of worry and irritation. "You shouldn't concern yourself with this. Forget about that photo." Mary's eyes were filled with a mixture of irritation and agitation that Alice had never seen before. The look she gave Alice as she took the photo from her daughter's hand seemed to be laden with repressed emotions, as if that simple object had triggered a storm of feelings she was desperate to control. Alice felt a lump in her throat and a chill down her spine as she realized she had touched on something significant and profound. "Calm down, Mom. "I was just taking a look," Alice replied, visibly uncomfortable. Mary tried to avert her gaze as Alice watched her mother with a new wave of unanswered questions. The atmosphere in the room felt tense, and Mary's attempt to quickly end the conversation only deepened the mystery. Alice realized that her mother's reaction was a barrier, like a nonverbal warning not to pursue the investigation. The photo's enigma was not just a mystery about Mr. Jason's past, it now seemed to be intertwined with family secrets that her mother was trying to protect. Alice knew that the answer was not just in understanding the photo itself, but in unraveling the story behind it and discovering why her mother reacted with such intensity. At the same time, the idea that her mother and Mr. Jason had some kind of personal and significant connection became clearer than ever. Mary's intense reaction wasn't just an attempt to protect a trivial secret, it seemed like there was something much more complex and important behind that photo and the way it was handled. Determined not to back down, Alice prepared to delve deeper into her investigation. Mary's reaction, though shocking, only served to strengthen her resolve to uncover the truth. Alice knew that the answer was hidden in layers of secrecy and complexity that now needed to be unraveled. The mystery of the photo, her mother's reaction, and the relationship with Mr. Jason were all elements of a larger story that Alice was about to explore with a new sense of urgency and purpose. With her heart in search of answers, Alice felt that she was on the verge of a crucial revelation. She knew that the only way to clarify the mysteries surrounding her was to confront Mr. Jason, as her mother would not accept talking about the shock and confusion caused by Mary's reaction. They had intensified her curiosity and the need for clear answers, and she prepared to face her boss with the courage that boiled within her. The next morning, Alice entered the office with a mix of nervousness and determination. The atmosphere was calm, with the usual soft sound of keyboard clicks and the low murmur of conversations. Mr. Jason was engrossed in his office, reviewing documents with his usual concentration. Alice knew that this was the right time to bring up the subject of the photo directly, now with a new focus. After a few moments of mental preparation, she entered her boss's office, trying to maintain a calm and controlled posture. Mr. Jason looked up, meeting her gaze. She took a deep breath and, with a tone that aimed to be casual but was filled with curiosity, said, "Mr. Jason, the other day I saw a photo on your desk, and I've been thinking about it. The woman in the image seems to be someone very special to you. May I ask who she is?" Mr. Jason raised an eyebrow, and a trace of surprise and caution crossed his face. Alice observed closely, noticing the change in his expression, which became a mixture of melancholy and sorrow. For a moment, the environment around them seemed to shrink, making their conversation the center of the entire office. "She was someone very important to me," Mr. Jason began, his voice carrying a tone deeper than usual. "She helped me when I needed someone the most. However, I abandoned her when she needed me the most. The decision I made, the circumstances, it was a choice I carry with me and that still weighs on my conscience." Mr. Jason's confession was a shock to Alice. His words were laden with regret and pain, and she could feel the gravity of the situation reflected in the way he spoke. The answer was a glimpse into the complexity of the story behind that photo. The woman in the image was not just a figure from the past, she had played a crucial role in her boss's life, and the decision to abandon her had left a deep mark on him. Now that she knew that the woman was her mother, her doubts only increased. For her part, Alice did not expect the revelation to be so direct and emotional. She took a deep breath, absorbing the response. Alice felt that she was getting closer to understanding the complexity of the emotions and decisions that had shaped the lives of the people around her. "Thank you for sharing this with me," Alice said, trying to hide the intensity of the emotion she felt. "I understand that it must be difficult to talk about it." Mr. Jason nodded, his gaze showing a mixture of gratitude and sadness. The conversation had opened a window into the depth of his experiences and inner struggles. Determined to find out more about the bond between her mother's past and her boss, Alice made a courageous decision. She knew she needed to piece together the fragmented parts of the story in a single moment, and for that, she needed to create an opportunity for Jason and her mother, Mary, to meet again. That night, with some insistence and much tact, Alice managed to convince her mother to invite her boss over for dinner at their home, as she wanted the two of them to meet. Despite the effort to uncover the secret, Alice did not mention anything about the photo to her mother, Mary. Although reluctant at first, she eventually agreed. Alice then officially invited Mr. Jason, who accepted immediately. When the day of the dinner finally arrived, the house was decorated with Mary's usual care, but the atmosphere was charged with palpable tension. Alice struggled to remain calm, trying to ensure everything went smoothly. The aroma of homemade food filled the kitchen, but Alice's anxiety and her mother's nervousness added a layer of uncertainty to the atmosphere. When the doorbell rang, Alice was the first to answer, finding Mr. Jason standing on the other side. He looked around with a mixture of apprehension and expectation, and when his eyes met Mary's, a look of shock and recognition crossed his face. "Jason?" Mary exclaimed, her voice filled with evident surprise. Her eyes widened as she looked at the man in front of her, and the emotion appeared in every word. Jason smiled with a mix of sadness and relief. "Mary, it's you. I searched for you everywhere. I never imagined I would find you here." Alice, who had been observing the exchange with growing confusion, decided to intervene. "Do you really know each other? What's going on?" Jason looked at Alice with an expression that carried a sense of regret. "Yes, Alice," he said, "we know each other. Mary is my sister. This means that I am your uncle." The revelation hit Alice like a bomb. Mary trembled, and tears began to form in her eyes. "Jason, I'm so sorry for everything. I got pregnant young, and I didn't know how to handle it. I distanced myself from the family because I didn't want you and our parents to see me in my situation. I was scared and thought it would be better that way." Jason stepped forward, his expression filled with understanding and pain. "Mary, I should have been by your side. Instead of supporting you, I and our parents pressured you to leave. We should have helped you, not abandoned you. I deeply regret not being the brother you needed." The moment was charged with emotion as Mary and Jason embraced, their words of regret and forgiveness floating between them. The reconciliation was visible in the tears and smiles that formed on their faces. Alice watched the scene with a mixture of surprise and relief, now understanding the complexities of the family situation involving her mother and Mr. Jason. Still in tears, Mary looked at Alice and then at Jason. "I know it was a mistake to cut off contact with you like that, Jason. I hope we can rebuild what was lost and find a way to heal the wounds of the past." Jason, with a sincere smile, held Mary's hand. "I promise to be present in your life and Alice's from now on. Let's create new moments and build a new story together. Family is important, and I want to be part of that again. Alice is an exceptional intern, and I'm glad to know the company will be in good hands in the future." That night, the dinner took place with a renewed sense of lightness. The conversations that followed were filled with stories of the past and plans for the future. Jason's presence, now recognized as Alice's uncle, brought a new sense of family unity, and his presence in their lives began to fill the gaps that had been opened since the death of her father. As the night progressed and the conversations became more relaxed, Alice felt a warmth of satisfaction and hope. The family was beginning to heal from the wounds of the past, and that meeting, which had begun with palpable tension, ended with a sense of renewal and future possibilities. The conversation flowed naturally, and the smiles were genuine, reflecting the beginning of a new phase in everyone's lives. With the table finally cleared and the last echoes of laughter still hanging in the air, Alice realized that the night had transformed the weight of old secrets into a promise of a more harmonious future. I hope you enjoyed this story full of twists and emotions. If you liked it and want more exciting narratives like this one, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe to the Stories Life channel. Here, every story is a new adventure, and we're always ready to surprise you. Also, leave your comment on what you thought of the story and suggestions for future narratives. See you next time.